Good morning, beautiful people of the internet, and welcome once more to the Sunday special live. Joined, not as always, but it's lovely to have her, by Jess Macaulay. I think this is your second time with us, Jess, at least.
It is, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We have Adam the G Lawrence, we have Piotr Rusinek, and I think everyone is in an exotic setting apart from myself, so I don't feel at all jealous or aggravated by the fact everyone has sunshine and I have rain. But it's another Sunday, and you know what that means. It's time to go through 5,656 words of Adam's supplement. And of course, we will tangent, we'll discuss things, it will go crazy, and sooner or later, I'm bound to offend somebody and the channel gets cancelled. So let's kick things off with Mr. Lawrence.
With the sword of Damocles hanging over our collective heads. How enjoyable, how enjoyable. So you'd think it might have been a bit of a quieter week this week, really, because 4-day week again because of Easter Monday. But actually, end of the month, beginning of the new quarter and all the rest of it, there's always a ton of stuff to get into and you can't do it all in one go. So I had a plough through the Bank of England Money and Credit Report, which is always interesting, especially to nerds like me. And also the ONS quarterly household accounts are effectively out. And we should have had the household accounts for last year as well, but for whatever reason we haven't. I don't know why not. So I went through the usual macro bits in terms of what's the good news, which is always in inverted commas because some good news is bad news for interest rates ultimately. We ended last week with the most hawkish man on the Bank of England committee saying, don't get too excited, we're not putting rates down yet. We then had the PMI figures, the purchasing managers indices saying economy's still doing nicely, thank you very much. Services sector still expanding. Manufacturing and construction both back to growth on the PMIs, which has been 12 months or more since they've been in that sort of territory. So good looking sort of news. Only just this side of 50, so tiny green shoots, but going in the right direction as they have been and above the high watermark. But services still doing really quite well at nearly printing a 53. Which is healthy growth territory. So healthy growth on the services side, therefore healthy growth on the whole of the economy side. Therefore, the Bank of England, especially the hawkish ones, go, what do we need to put interest rates down for then? If everything's fine, there's no problem because they don't necessarily look at it like you and I, who would love to see a bit of respite on the interest rate side. So the bond yields on the back of that hardened a little bit. You don't have sort of mega trading weeks normally in these shorter weeks because apart from anything else, people are away, and it does tend to be a bit quieter, but they drifted back upwards again, more towards the sort of 4% mark. We didn't quite get to the 4%, but sad news really, because we've had a lot of weeks of very good news in a row. And then I felt primarily I had to address the fact that the Halifax House Price Index said we were 1% down in March, and I thought I would address that head on, as I've been one of the ones saying, you know, the market's not in bad shape at all. We should do okay this year, 4% upwards, my prediction for the year. And I've sort of clarified that a bit really by saying, number one, the 1% down in March doesn't look too problematic, to be honest. It looks like a bit of a correction. Nationwide only printed minus 0.2. I would say that Nationwide's data is more biased towards investor stock. Whereas Halifax's data is much more biased towards owner-occupiers. So that's definitely a factor. I would say the investors are doing okay. From all the real-time stats in the market, of which I like to look at Chris Watkins' stuff as the main provider of this stuff, you know, the sales per square foot are looking pretty healthy. They're sort of 3% up based on the last quarter, which will take some months to get through into the land reg. But what his stats are also proving is that cheaper stock is selling quite well. And that's kind of fits in with the narrative that we've been used to over the past, 12 months, really, that the south and the most expensive parts of the country are struggling a bit more in terms of the market, losing sort of 1, 2, 3% over the past 12 months, whereas the north and the cheaper parts are not suffering so much and in fact have been more like flat, up 1%, up 2% sort of areas, with a few areas that have done a bit better than that. And it does look to be as simple as the stuff that yields still works for investment, and the stuff that struggles a bit more with yield is tougher unless you're buying cash or putting huge lumpy deposits down, which of course some people in the south are doing. remember 55% of let property does not have a mortgage against it, but that doesn't necessarily mean 55% of what's being bought into the sector will not have a mortgage against it, because that's two completely different conversations. So it does look like the 1% down was a bit of a headline, really, and I thought I'd have a bit of a dive into it to discuss whether the train was still on the tracks or not for this sort of crack up boom, which, to be fair, I have said is probably a 5-year thing, not a 6-month or a 1-year thing. All of the analysis I constantly read just seems to miss out inflation, which, remember, we've had this massive increase in national minimum wage, and a lot of wage increases this month, a lot of pension increases this month, and there's been a lot of nonsense articles around, frankly, that I've been debunking left, right, and centre and upsetting people on the internet by doing. So it's been an interesting. I know who would have thought it? Who would have thought it? But there's lots of there's lots of proof, and the biggest proof of all is really contained within the ONS's quarterly sector accounts for households, because what it shows is real household disposable income, which is my darling of metrics, because it's real. That doesn't mean it's not fake. That means it's adjusted for inflation. Bear in mind, it's real. It's per household, and it's households who pay rent. It's not individuals that pay rent. It's households that pay rent. Now, some of those households are made of individuals, of course, especially if you do HMO and things like that. But most people we let to are not individuals. They are families. So it's the households that we're particularly keen on looking at. Disposable, as in the taxman has had his or her or their slice, which is important as well, because you can only pay from disposable. You can't pay with paper. If it's all gone in tax, then you haven't got it, have you? So, and we're looking at income. So it's my key metric. And I dispute, and I would argue with anybody that looks at real household disposable income per capita as the relevant metric for what we're looking at here, which is ultimately the health of the property market, because it's not the per capita that we're overly worried about. Of course, that gives a broader sign of economic health. How do you feel as an individual in the economy? Are you better off? But if there are more people per household, for example, because of cost of living, some people have moved back in with family, doing the multi-generational thing a little bit more. And some of it, of course, is also migration and people clubbing together, living with extended family, cousins, people in their extended networks. I reiterate the point, is households that pay rent. So when real household disposable income is rising, as it has done significantly, and it was up another 0.7% in Q4 of 2023. Now, you might say, well, it's buttons, isn't it, 0.7? But it's not bad during a recession, remember. It's supposed to have been a recessionary time. So I'd say that's pretty positive, actually. And this is all about working out how sustainable is this strong rise in rent that we've been dealing with over the past sort of 18 months to 2 years, particularly. And the point is, it's still got quite a lot longer left to run, I think it's fair to say. And the affordability ceilings aren't in particular trouble as yet. So that's got to be pretty good news. I've also theorised this week that real household disposable income for Q1 24 and also for Q2 24, which obviously we haven't had yet, is going to look pretty chuffing healthy, because apart from anything else, wage rises have continued at around about 6%. We've seen that inflation number coming down to about 4%, so that gives people a 2% advantage. And then we've got a big help from April the 6th onwards, because we've got the 2% decrease in national insurance. So everybody's income is improved relatively dramatically, as long as they're over that, they're into the secondary threshold, or whatever it is, at the point at which you start paying employees national insurance. So that's going to put our HDI up by some really, really significant numbers. What are the consequences of that? As I say, from a landlord rental perspective, people have got more money to spend, and you'll see the affordability constraint not really stopping people so much, which is good news. Does it mean everyone's going to wake up, suddenly realise they feel quite good, they've got money in their pocket, and they're going to vote Conservative at the next election? I would suggest not. Country's too angry, had enough. And also, if you track back to 1997, which is a good year to compare against this election, because although Keir Starmer's got the charisma of a cardboard cutout of Keir Starmer, as opposed to a Tony Blair style character, you have got a very similar long period of one particular government. There's been a recession or a significant economic event, or there's been a couple of them, to be honest. And in 1997, John Major and his pals had actually sorted things out quite well, but we still had a change of government. Now, you could say that's because, remember, John was being portrayed as the grey man on Spitting Image and all the rest of it, and he wasn't the most exciting, even if he was getting up to surprising extracurricular activities sometimes during his tenure, which I still struggle to believe, to be honest. We won't get Jay started on that topic, though. But even though that was what was going on, this time around, you've got a slight difference in that you haven't got two wonderfully charismatic figures facing off against each other. You've got two technocrats, really, one of whom at least is certainly financially competent and has proved himself to be so, one of whom looks like he's got a competent Chancellor of the Exchequer to steward the ship, but probably has a few more. Well, there's people on both parties, on both extremes, who I don't think any of us like very much and don't feel that comfortable with. Let's see what happens. But it's interesting, really. I was reflecting the other day and thinking, in the last 30 years, the only time we've changed government, realistically, is when there's been an event that really probably isn't very fair to blame the government at the time on. So 2008 financial crisis, did having a right-leaning government in the US change things? No, it didn't. It still would have happened. It still did happen. It happened in an even bigger way. So was it Labour's fault? Not really. COVID, which is not cited as much of an excuse, and mostly because, the stuff that the government did during COVID has just disgusted everybody so much in different ways that they can't allow themselves to use that as an excuse for why. But we've probably had, in fact, I'd say we've certainly had, since 2010, the best team in power since October 2022, but they probably had the hardest economic times to deal with. They're at least competent. I wouldn't go as far as to say they're trustworthy necessarily. It is difficult, especially when, in fairness, Sunak's not getting a lot of political capital for allowing the non-dom regime to be changed, even though his wife is one of the major beneficiaries of it. But no one ever gives political capital to a man who's a de facto billionaire anyway, realistically. So we are where we are with all of that. But that's not going to, the events of this are not going to change. But households are doing well. The market's doing fine. The market's going to continue to be dragged forward by inflation, in my opinion. Inflation for the rest of the year, throwing a dart at about 3% for me. I can't fathom all these people who are saying it's going to go under 2 and stay there. I just think it's utter nonsense. The ingredients aren't there. And there's already a few articles coming out saying, oh, actually, wages are a bit sticky. Oh, duh, no. And sticky means they don't come down very quickly. I mean, it's like, I learned that in Economics 101, right, in the 1990s sometime. And that one's still true. And of course, if wages go up, prices go up. And it is as simple as that, as companies try to recover it. What would stop prices going up? Well, affordability not being there. I refer you back to real household disposable income, folks. And so where's the ingredient to stop all of this? Inflation 3, wages 5, net effect +2. Okay, there's tax to consider in that mixer and all the rest of it. But tax has been, certainly for the moment, on the way down. So that's the whistle stop. That's the tour. The audio file, unfortunately, hasn't uploaded today. So you've got to crack on with the 5656 until I get back later and I'm able to probably record it in video format. So sorry about that, folks. Or you can use one of these clever bits of kits that reads it out to you. But AI Adam wasn't available and Real Adam recorded it, took 34 minutes and then it wouldn't upload. So Real Adam was a bit furious about that, to be honest, for the moment. But there we go.
What's out, Adam, because we got our first 1-star review for our book. I noticed a couple of weeks ago, and the reason for that was that apparently the Kindle version is not compatible with the read to voice kind of thing feature. So.
I've always tell you you're terrible men, so I'm not surprised. Well deserved. Well deserved. Well, is it as good as the person who commented who was incensed at turning up to a property and poppadoms meeting and then being expected to pay for a curry because she was fasting, even though the food wasn't being served until after sundown? Did you see that post at all?
No.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. You have to point me in the direction of it, Adam.
So anyone who hasn't done a property in poppadoms yet, it's on James Rogers' Facebook feed. Anyone who hasn't done a property in poppadoms yet, the point is relaxed networking over a curry, no hard sales pitches, none of that. Property in poppadoms kind of gives you a clue about what's going to be needed. But of course, you are expected to turn up and pay the curry house for the food you're going to eat. Or even if you weren't going to eat, personally, I think it'd be reasonable enough to still pay for a seat, because otherwise someone else would probably be paying to eat in that seat at the same time. So to be clear, James isn't charging any entrance fees, but you do have to pay for your food. And it's one of those, moments where you just think, what is the world coming to when someone thinks they can turn up for free, drink in everything, and then leave and then took a sly shot at saying, oh, it's disgustingly disinclusive, and then something else beginning with D. It's a bit of a laugh, to be honest with you, because it's one of the most relaxed and inclusive networking meetings I've ever been to. But can't please everybody, folks. If you don't have any haters, you haven't done anything of any meaning. I had some guy this week telling me I didn't know anything about tenancies. I didn't know anything about letting agencies. I didn't know anything about. And he asked what my qualifications were, and then after I listed them, he didn't seem to come back to me with anything meaningful, which was surprising.
It's a good thing you don't own any letting agencies. Gosh, wow.
Indeed. He basically put forward, and to be honest, I poked the bear, because he put forward this list of, I can only describe as terrorist-style demands that he was making of his letting agent in order to ensure they were effectively doing their job. And I said to him, as I'm wont to do in my dry sense of humour, it must be quite hard for you to turn a profit, because I assume your fee rate is 38% plus VAT for dealing with you as a client. And then he started to uncover the beast. Well, agents aren't even worth 2%. And I just thought, well, mate, do it yourself then. Do you know what I mean? He was like, well, I'm remote, so I can't do it myself. It's like, well, we manage several hundred properties remotely, so I would take issue with that, mate, to be honest with you. But there we go. Right, I'm in transit now, folks. So I'm going to go off cam, off mic for a bit, and I'll chip back in when I can. Okay.
Okay, nice one, Adam. Thanks for update. Wow, got the whole
Interesting
show
stuff,
now for
isn't it?
ourselves.
So in real terms,
Very
go on,
good.
Go ahead.
yeah. So in real terms, how are people finding deals at the moment? It's obviously an open
think it's
question for
interesting.
everybody that's watching, but go on, Jess.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting on the South Coast, because it's exactly what Adam's sort of saying. We're getting lots of estate agency calls. There's lots of stock on the market. It sort of at the moment feels like there's loads and loads of opportunities around, but everything's got a price right. So if it's priced right, it's selling straight away. The stock that's maybe not caught up is the stuff where the estate agents are chasing you a lot more, or the stuff that's a bit more unusual perhaps is difficult to sell at the moment. But I think from my perspective on the South Coast, there's lots and lots of stock around that could work. It depends on what your requirements are in a deal at the moment, but I think it's a case of sort of, we're quite lucky. I've not been in a market like this for a good long time, where you can sort of pick the deals that work best for you. So yeah, it feels pretty good from that perspective. And interestingly, from a rental perspective as well, it's probably similar. There's still not that much stock on the market. We maybe saw a bit of a dip earlier this year, where it was a bit more difficult to sort of rent things out, but actually now there's not that much stock on the market again. We're starting to see the holiday let stuff as well, I think, in real terms, starting to bite. So you're seeing more aborted deals where people maybe were going to buy a holiday property, and again they're now trying to be sold, but we still have quite a lot of stock that's used as that. So again, we've got less in the rental market than maybe in some other areas. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time to be buying if you're on a sort of a sales spree or looking for stock at the moment. I would say it's there's lots to look at, but it's just picking the right ones and sort of being ready when they come.
Yeah, we're just in the process of writing the article for Property Investor News, and the main theme of the article is that there's a lot of people now coming to us for asking us to value the properties for an auction, because they see an auction as this
Really?
portal for action, and then when things actually happen. But then a lot of people come to us with tenanted properties, and some of them are just not up to market rent. Some of them are just have to sell on a yield basis, because effectively they're just selling to investors. And people, the valuations that we give people are rather disappointing to them, because if something is under-let and it's also tenanted right now, no one else is going to buy this apart from investors, and investors require profit and return. And we keep telling people to get their property vacant and then try open market first before coming to an auction.
That's a really, really good advice.
Yeah,
I think there's at least 2 people who will never call me again based on valuations we gave them last week. But you know, it's
only
kind of,
2, Jay. You've been slacking.
I know. But you know, they bought the properties, I think, like 2021, 2022. So the mortgages were coming towards an end, and the main reason for selling is, well, I'm going from like X above base to 5 above base or whatever it is, and you know, they're marginal deals, and maybe they just bought because, you know, in 2022 to 2023 there was a bit of everyone was buying everything. You know, there was loads of properties coming to the market, people picking them up. A lot of people were overpaying, saying, oh no, this isn't overpaying, this is just a new market. And now the heat isn't there as much as it was then. So people are struggling to sell, and to sell at the price that they paid for it 2 or 3 years ago, which is not a I told you so moment. But there's at least 2 people that will never call me again. Took it very, very personally. And I was like,
it is hard though, isn't it? I suppose when you've been in a situation like that and you've been given one price and then sort of accommodating that as it comes down, because it is absolutely a buyer's market at the moment. It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is, yeah, but that also creates opportunities for people who are willing to buy tenanted properties and then get them vacant, sell them to end users, because at the end of the day, end users will pay the most, and that difference between vacant possession and tenanted stock is it's growing. But also, do you guys want a rule of thumb statistics? That's really useful.
Oh,
yeah.
Go on.
So the home rate stock, I noticed an interesting relationship between the price the home rate paid, the guide price, and then the actually end sell price. So normally, usually the guide price for the stock that home rate has purchased 2 years, 3 years ago, whatever that is, it's about 25% of what home rate actually paid. So for example, if they bought a property for 2 million, it's probably guided at 500k right now, and it's probably gonna sell for about 1 million, with all of the legal issues and tenancies and stuff like that. But there's a lot of money in those home rate stocks, home rate sales. But usually, if someone is interested in the home rate stock, you probably need to expect to pay double what the guide price is to have a chance at it. That's my observation.
You still have to be very careful with that, right? Because Home REIT were known for going in and just overpaying for everything so they could get the assets and put the providers in and do all this kind of stuff. Obviously, none of it ever happened, or for the most part, it didn't happen. Or the operators that they put in went bust or didn't let it, or it was the guy who owns Home REIT's cousin's best friend's brother's dog's sister that was actually setting up the housing association. Absolute madness. So when you think, oh, it's £2 million, they probably overpaid by 500,000 or 600,000 pounds. But if you're still picking up for £1 million, you're still you're still 70 pence in the pound in real value. So good statistics, but they clearly have an asset manager in place going, I can't put this into auction anywhere near close what you paid for it, because you overpaid for it, you mugs. And then go, right, I've got to motivate the market around this. There's a lease in place that isn't operational. They've gone bust. But in order to buy it free of that, because a lot of their sales are conditional upon them removing those leases that are in place. So it's not a clear-cut sale, but anyone who's picking it up 50% of what Home REIT has paid for it, you have to think that they're balancing it on real metrics in place today, rather than, oh, they pay 2 for it, if I pay 1 for it, I've got a deal. And there are so many people out there that think, oh, but they paid 150 for it and I'm paying 90, so actually I'm getting a bargain. Well, not if it's worth 75, you're not.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got to be really careful with stuff like that. But it's really interesting when they're selling 100 and something plus properties a month, and they've been doing that for 6 months ish. You've got to be thinking how much of that is being carved right out of the balance sheet. It must be absolutely disgusting. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if that was my balance sheet.
No, definitely not. There's some great deals there if you can get them, I think. Really nice
And
stuff.
for anyone looking, it's
funny that, isn't it?
Residential. Go on, Jess, go on.
Don't tell them, Jay. Don't tell them.
No, let them go for it.
No,
It
but
keeps
it's
them away from all the stock I want to buy.
But you get that with new builds as well. I picked one up, as you guys know, earlier this year, and the value of that, I think when they first bought it back in 2007, isn't really that different to the value of it today in 2024. So it's really deceptive what you can see on Landreg versus kind of where the market is, and that can definitely impact sort of your thinking on deals. Luckily, obviously, we picked that one up at auction, so there was so it was a good deal. But I think it's just careful what you look at, isn't it? Again, I've seen a couple of really cheap units in Southsea recently, and I was looking at them with a property friend and did some digging into it, and someone's just paid an obscene amount of money for one of them, and there's lots of things wrong with it that I hope that they found. You've got to do your due diligence and really sort of look into it with stock at the moment, because there's so much on the market. You want to get the good stuff, not the stuff that's complicated, or unless it's at a really, really good price.
What's the kind of stock you're looking for, Jess? What's your
I like multiple units.
Multiple
portfolios, multi-unit blocks, although that might change a bit in the next few weeks with the MDR stamp duty relief going, which is a bit of a shame, on the 1st of June. So yeah, that's the kind of stock that I normally buy, but I'll buy anything if the deal's good. So yeah, how about you guys? What are you looking at?
We're on the hunt for commercial property that's double digits yields and in good areas.
Lovely.
And with long leases and the kind of sexy potential that we want to see in a property.
And we also like the unsexy issues that kind of stop other people buying it as well, that we know how to fix. We like a couple of those. Those are good fun. But if it follows the first 2 or 3 metrics, then, if it's got an issue with it, we don't mind, especially if it's one that we know how to solve.
It also depends who we're looking for. Like, we buy different properties that some of our clients want, because some of our clients don't like dealing with all the unsexy stuff that we get involved with. But at the same time, it's I guess, like with the Auction Buyers Club, it's kind of quite broad spectrum, like, for yourself, like everyone's looking slightly different things, and everyone would buy pretty much anything.
Yeah, definitely.
So
if the deal's right,
if the deal's right,
for sure. But I also think it's because you don't know until you know. That's what's quite interesting with auction stock, and also with stock at the moment on the market. You can sort of listen to what someone else is buying, or look at some deals at auction that are coming out, and then maybe you can look in your local area. I didn't sort of plan to go and buy regulated tenancies, but I bought quite a few, and that tends to be something that I actually actively look for at auctions, because I've seen other people sort of look at those. So I think that's what's quite good, sort of surrounding yourself with other people, whether it be through buyers clubs or property networks and stuff. It just opens your eyes to other deals or how to stack a deal in a different way.
Yeah, well, that unpredictability of auctions is, I think, what keeps the Auction Buyers Club going, because we've been running this now for 4 years, and it never seems boring. It's like always something exciting, right? And always something keeps us on the edge of the seat.
Absolutely. I think that's one of my things. I like to keep learning, and I think it can feel quite like a washing machine sometimes in property, because you're doing like rinse and repeat. You found something that works, you just keep doing it, and get a bit monotonous whilst fun. Whereas auctions, there'll be some random clause in a legal pack. You think, what on earth does that mean? Or why have you put that in there, sort of thing? Or what is this? You're constantly learning, which I really enjoy. So it is good. Auctions are fun for sure. Or you find really random units to buy, like a stairwell or something like that.
It's what keeps us interested, and that is to be honest, that's a really big ask, because it takes quite a lot to keep us kind of interested in the same thing, because we like to do quite a few different things. We've got the club, we've got we've got the Property Auction Hunters YouTube. We just like talking auctions. We've got our own trading activity. There's like 5 or 6 different things that we do, but they're all kind of focused around the auctions because of that unpredictability, because of that certainty, because of the opportunity that it offers. It creates a limited marketplace, and we like to take advantage of great opportunities.
Where are you seeing them at the moment? I don't know about you guys, but I'm still certainly seeing that, like, I don't know, 3-bed houses are still really competitive, like even in the marketplace or at auction. I just wondered if you guys are seeing different stuff. Or
I think flats have fallen through the roof in terms of value and attractiveness. Even if you take a vanilla flat, insofar as it's a 999-year lease, the service charge is low, there's no EWS1, there's no doubling ground rent, there's none of the mess or things that you expect to see from other flats where they're in auction. But you look at anything like that where you think actually the running cost is muted because it's a long leasehold, because it's not in a big block of flats. Those are negatively valued because they're valued against other flats that have those issues. And I think those are great opportunities. I know people get nervous, but for a 999-year lease, you don't really, for the next 5 generations, 10 generations, really have to worry about a short lease issue. And I think the values are muted as well, because people have been waiting 11 years for this Leasehold Reform Act to come in, and they've just said they're delaying it again. They can't figure it out still. So I think if you're into residential and you still like your single let, or you can get a 3-bedroom flat and do like a 3-person HMO or whatever, then I think there's opportunity there if the running cost of the flat is low. So like a converted Victorian house that's split into 3 flats, it's a 999-year lease. I would say something like that is gold dust, because it's massively undervalued. They keep going unsold at auction. You're seeing loads of them in Essex and Kent, if that's something that people fancy as an area. But yeah, seeing massive opportunity there. Wouldn't touch it with a barge pole, because we're not really into residential tenants, but that's a personal preference, rather than it not being a viable investment opportunity or metric. But yeah.
One of the biggest things as well is the opportunities are the freehold ground rents. It's a kind of like we talked about this obviously with Guy Charlison a couple of months ago, but last week I've been speaking with one of the rigs kind of auctioneer, like rigs qualified auctioneer, and he was telling me about how they approach now those freehold ground rents when, for example, there's a couple of flats that are like 50 years left on the lease, and those are about 600k when with a long lease. So the lease extension would be about 70k. But the guys are saying that right now they kind of like discounting the market value, even though you can still charge it. But long term, they're just saying we're not looking at the market value as being kind of applied to those calculations. So instead of 70k, they take into account like 40k for the lease extension. And then obviously when you're selling that freehold ground rent, you expect to pay approximately 50% of the of the amount that's due for the lease extension. So basically, those leases, those freehold ground rents, instead of being valued at like 70k, they're valued at something around 35, and that's quite it's a gamble, but it's a big opportunity because there's a massive uncertainty, and from what it looks like, those changes are going to be delayed and delayed, and most likely everything will remain as it is, but it's a big opportunity for people to actually look into this.
They make me nervous, those.
I know someone who jumped into that very
Oh,
early,
yeah.
about 2016, 2017, right?
Yeah.
So the reforms were, I think, starting like 2011. So they weren't early doors, but his thought was, I'll buy some really nice, some really ugly flats in super nice areas. So he started buying these 3, 4, 5 bedroom flats in like St John's Wood, Hyde Park, all along like that part of London. And he had an investor, a big investor, like I think the guy was a couple of 100 million or something. I don't know if it was a billion, a couple of 100 million. And he was basically funding all of his purchases. And he kind of said, what I'm doing is I'm buying them massively cheap because they're under 50 years on the lease. Some of them were like 20 years left on the lease. He goes, and I'm putting in a brand new refurb, like the refurb you'd expect a Russian oligarch to move into. Not that one would move into a flat in London, but one where it's opulent and really well done. And obviously, the longer you stay in these deals, with the years going down and the laws not changing, instead of him, it's like the interest rate swaps. The interest rates haven't gone against him yet; they're still in the favor of the bank. So the margins were going down. He was renting them out, some of them as holiday lets, some of them as long-term lets, just to kind of get some money coming in. But his funder has started pulling the properties from him because they have to now look at paying to get the leases extended, because some of them are falling below 30 years. And the kind of thresholds are 80 years, 60 years, 50 years, 30 years, 21 years, 14 years, 7 years, and anything under that
why those thresholds there? What actually makes those thresholds being a threshold?
So the main threat, so 80 years is obviously what the banks like. Anything above 80 years, because it's a marriage value, they get nervous under 80 years. 60 years, there's not a massive drop in terms of value, or there's not a massive increase in the lease extension cost between 80 and 60. But at 50, anything when you get close to 50, the cost of the lease extension jumps up.
Why?
Same. Why? I don't. It's one of these calculations. Yeah, it's the way the calculation works. And the other thing is there are leasehold property laws.
I want to know, Jay. I'm on a mission now. I'm gonna go on ChatGPT now.
Go on ChatGPT, because the other ones is the strange ones where you think it's every 7 years, 21, 14, and 7. You think, why would they be 7 years apart? But there are reductions in massive reductions in asset value at those points. On top of that, the lease extension costs jump up massively at each of those 7-year drops. And then there is, so if you're not living in the property at those 7-year intervals, your ability, so one of the things that happens when a lease runs all the way down to zero, if it runs down to zero, you're living there, it's your primary primary residence.
Yeah.
It then reverts onto a regulated tenancy. But if you're an investor and it's an investment, and you don't have those protections, but there are other kind of things that kick in at those 21, 14, and 7-year points.
Yeah, I've got a family member who's in one of those types of properties, and it's gone below zero. And I think Liverpool Council has to extend the lease but they will do it, and they're all the tenants are on regs at the moment. So it's really, really weird.
In some of those areas where they have like leasehold houses, and it's the local government that owns what would have been mine shafts near to the property or under the property, they tend not to grant regs, because regs is actually a stronger type of occupation than a leasehold almost, because you have greater protections and you're in there until you pop your clogs. Or if there's a right of survivorship in the reg, then obviously your child or nephew or niece or whoever can inherit if they're living in the property for X amount of time before then. So it becomes really problematic for them.
Interesting.
Yeah, we get quite a lot of that on the Isle of Wight. Actually, we've got lots of leasehold land where the lords and ladies split the land up and stuff. So you get lots of leasehold houses over there, which is quite problematic, because the original freeholders are obviously well away, because it was a long time ago that it was chopped up. So it'll be interesting to know what they'll do then.
Well, there you can, if so it operates the same as an absentee freeholder with a leasehold flat. If the freeholder is absent, you can go down a long and convoluted route to enfranchise the freehold. But it is long and convoluted. It would make the property easier to mortgage, but I like these things. I used to work for a family trust, and they'd have X amount of their trust in freehold ground rents in the UK, and then in regs, and then in life tenancies. Life tenancies are really different because you can't charge them rent. So instead of being at the same, but the flip side to that is that they have to maintain the property.
Yeah.
So they almost have to treat it like their own home. And those are really interesting because some of them you can pay 30% for property's value on some of those. And they're super interesting. It's a very limited market, and some people get life tenancies and regs confused because technically a reg can live there for the entirety of their life, but they have to be mainly on the regulated rent register or paying some form of marginalized rent. But super interesting stuff. I like anything that limits a marketplace or scares people off, or where it may find itself on the market or an auction where some of the big players that buy these things haven't noticed it. I know someone who buys regs that they hope that no one else has seen, that either doesn't go to auction or doesn't go to market, or hopefully they're friendly with an agent who says, I don't know how to value this. What would you pay for it? I love those because those people then go straight to the likes of Mountview Homes or Peers Group or a Granger, and they sell them directly to them because they love buying stuff like that. But yeah, it makes interesting little things like that, difficult deals like that make the world go round. I would rather do a deal with a reg or a live tenant than with an AST. That shows my level of risk. Yeah. That shows my level of risk.
Yeah, but I do think they're good though. I remember talking about it at Pit once and someone saying, God, that's so risky what you're doing. But I think it's calculated risk, hopefully, for some of that stuff.
An AST is so much more risk. An AST is so much more risk. Because if an AST stops paying, they can say it's because, there's a leaky tap or whatever, or you didn't serve the right to rent thing, or there wasn't a boiler certificate, or any marginal little thing like that. If a reg stops paying, they're out.
Yeah, that's
the one protection a reg has. There's no right to rent reg. There's no this, that, and the other. There's none of this compliance stuff, which is good and bad. But if they stop paying, there's no real protection against stopping paying. And it's more of a hands-off kind of thing. There's less that you do as a landlord to a regulated rent or a live tenant than there is for an AST. There's far less turnaround, far less voids. For me, the aggravation level is far lower, and the price is far lower. So I have an aggravation price cost metric that I don't like to cross over.
It must be why you like commercial as well, Jay.
100%, yeah. Business to business relationship, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it will be quite timely for those properties that have limited market, because tomorrow we're going to be releasing a video on Property Auction Hunters about a non-standard property and investing in those, and the risk-reward ratio between like how much risk you're taking with those properties and how much profit you need to bake into the purchase to make sense. So
I'm nodding like this, but I can't remember which property it is. I'm just like, yes, that's exactly what we're talking about.
But again, they're really interesting, like stock, aren't they? Because I think sometimes you think, why is that so cheap? And then you start digging into it, and it's because it's not standard, and then you can't get lending on it. It's they, like you say, sometimes you can, so they can be really interesting things. Cool, that sounds exciting.
Yeah,
some of my favorite stuff, and Jess, you've kind of showed us a couple of bits of like these recently, is where you've dug the information out and the seller doesn't know about it and the agent doesn't know about it. So you're like, I know all of this stuff. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, no, me too. Hopefully not giving it using it to your advantage though, hey?
Amazing, cool. Well, I think without Adam, let's wrap up early. We have already not exhausted, but exceeded our typical word count on those chats, which feels very satisfying.
But I mean, let us know in the comments, like, what deals are you doing at the moment? You don't have to like give us areas and numbers and postcodes, but like, what kind of deals are you doing? Where are you finding opportunities, or how are you finding opportunities? Just be good market research. So, yeah, if you're happy to share.
And if you haven't subscribed to Property Auction Hunters, go to Property Auction Hunters, subscribe, bell icon. And yeah, we're releasing a video tomorrow at 7 p.m. But there's quite a big library of past videos. If someone is bored this Monday.
Not if someone is bored. If someone wants to learn something interesting about properties that go to auction, then that's where you go. Not if you're bored, you know.
Now yeah, that's right. We want to learn and have experience our way of analyzing properties. Brilliant. Okay, Jess, thank you so much for joining us and stepping in for Helen. Yeah, it's always good to have the four of us, obviously with Adam. But yeah, nice for you to join, and hope to have you again soon at some point.
Thank you. Cool.
And yeah, thanks everyone for watching and putting the comments in. Nice to see Ivona, Joe, Dominic, Blondine, and you guys commenting. So see you all next week.
See you later, guys.
Bye.